Jim Morrison, a dynamic vocalist and composer for the 1960s rock band The Doors, passed away at the age of 27 in Paris. Jim Morrison was a rock musician and singer from the United States. He met the members of The Doors, a legendary band that would go on to have successes like Light My Fire, Hello, I Love You, Touch Me, and Riders on the Storm, while studying film at UCLA. Morrison, who was notorious for his binge drinking, drug use, and aggressive onstage antics, left The Doors in 1971 to pursue a poetry career and relocated to Paris, where he probably passed away at the age of 27 from heart failure. On December 8, 1943, in Melbourne, Florida, James Douglas Morrison, a singer and composer, was born. His father, George Stephen Morrison, was a naval aviator who attained the rank of Rear Admiral. George oversaw American naval troops when stationed on the USS Bonhomme Richard during the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964, which helped spark the Vietnam War. Admiral George Morrison was an accomplished pianist who delighted in entertaining guests at gatherings. There was always a big gathering around the piano with my dad playing popular tunes that he could pick up by ear. Morrison was an obedient and brilliant youngster in his early years who excelled in school and showed a special interest in reading, writing, and drawing. Around the age of 5, he had a horrific yet formative experience while traveling with his family across the New Mexico desert. Indian laborers had been on a truck when it crashed, scattering their dead and dismembered remains across the highway. I could feel the vibrations of the people surrounding me, knowing that they were my parents and all, but all I saw was weird red paint and people lying around. Then I suddenly understood that they were no more aware of what was going on than I was. I felt terror for the first time at that point. The encounter left a lasting impact on Morrison, who subsequently wrote about it in the lyrics of his song, Peace Frog. Indians scattered on dawn's roadway bleeding, ghosts flood the little child's frail eggshell mind, despite his family members' claims that he exaggerated the events. Due to the repeated moves Morrison experienced as a child, first from Florida to California and then to Alexandria, Virginia, where he attended George Washington High School, his father's military career. As an adolescent, Morrison started to rebel against his father's stringent rules, learning about alcohol and women while becoming increasingly resistant to authoritative figures. His sister Anne recounted, one time he told the instructor he was getting a brain tumor removed and walked out of class. Morrison continued to be a voracious reader, an enthusiastic diarist, and a respectable student despite this. He requested the full works of Nietzsche from his parents as a graduation gift in 1961, demonstrating both his love of books and his rebelliousness. Morrison returned to his home state after finishing high school to enroll at Florida State University in Tallahassee. Morrison opted to move to the University of California, Los Angeles to study cinema after being named to the Dean's List his freshman year. There were no established authority because film was a relatively new academic field, which attracted the free-spirited Morrison a lot. He justified his interest in movies by saying, "There are no specialists, thus, theoretically, each student knows almost as much as any professor." At UCLA, he also acquired a growing interest in poetry, consuming William Blake's romantic works as well as contemporary beat poetry by Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac while writing his own. Morrison rapidly lost interest in his film studies, though, and if it weren't for his concern about being conscripted into the Vietnam War, he probably would have stopped attending school completely. Only because, in his own words, "I didn't want to go into the army, and I didn't want to work, and that's the darn truth," did he graduate from UCLA in 1965. Morrison formed the band The Doors in 1965 with drummer John Densmore, guitarist Robbie Krieger, and classical pianist Ray Manzarek. The Doors were signed by Elektra Records the next year, with Morrison serving as lead singer and leader, and their self-titled first album was released in January 1967. Break On Through, To the Other Side, The Doors' debut song, was only moderately successful. The band's second hit, Light My Fire, which peaked at number 1 on the Billboard pop charts, propelled them to the top of the rock and roll world. When they played the song live on The Ed Sullivan Show later that year, The Doors and Morrison in particular became well known. Morrison had agreed not to perform the line, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher," on the air due to its blatant drug illusion, but when the cameras started rolling, he performed it anyway, solidifying his position as rock's new rebel hero. The Doors' most well-known song, "Light My Fire," is still quite popular and frequently appears on lists of the best rock songs ever made. The Doors created a rush of albums and songs over the following few years, fusing Morrison's melancholy lyrical lyrics and eccentric stage appearance with the band's distinct and varied style of psychedelic music. When the Music's Over and the top 40 successes, "Love Me Two Times" and "People Are Strange," were included on their sophomore album, Strange Days, which was released in 1967. Waiting for the Sun, their third album, was released a few months later in 1968. It has the singles, "Hello, I Love You," which also reached number 1, "Love Street," and "5 to 1, among others. The Soft Parade in 1969, Morrison Hotel in 1970, and LA Woman in 1971 were the following 3 records they recorded. Morrison's private life and public persona were swiftly spinning out of control during the band's brief reign atop the music industry. His drug and alcohol abuse got worse, which resulted in violent outbursts at concerts that infuriated police officers and nightclub owners around the nation. Although Morrison temporarily wed music journalist Patricia Keneally in a Celtic pagan wedding in 1970, he left everything to Courson in his will. Morrison spent almost all of his adult life with Courson. Morrison, however, continued to be a notorious womanizer all during his relationships with Courson and Keneally. On the evening of December 9, 1967, in New Haven, Connecticut, the effects of his drug addiction, volatile temper, and adultery came to a disastrous conclusion. Prior to a performance, Morrison was high, intoxicated, and having an affair with a young lady when he was challenged by a police officer and mace sprayed. He then stormed the stage and launched into a vile diatribe, which resulted in his arrest there and the subsequent rioting in the neighborhood. Morrison was subsequently detained in 1970 for allegedly exposing himself during a concert in Florida. However, the accusations against him were ultimately dismissed after his passing. In the spring of 1971, Morrison took a break from the Doors and relocated to Paris with Courson in an effort to reclaim his life. Nevertheless, his drug use and melancholy persisted. On July 3, 1971, Courson discovered Morrison dead in their apartment's bathtub. It appears that he had had a heart attack. The absence of an autopsy due to the French authorities' lack of suspicion of foul play has given rise to countless rumors and conspiracy theories surrounding his demise. In a book he wrote in 2007, club owner Sam Bernett of Paris claimed that Morrison had overdosed on heroin inside his establishment and had been transported back to his flat and dumped in the bathtub to conceal the true cause of death. One of the most popular tourist attractions in the city is now Jim Morrison's burial, which is located in the renowned Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. He was only 27 years old when he passed away. Morrison, who was portrayed by actor Val Kilmer in the 1991 movie The Doors, is still regarded as one of the most storied and enigmatic rock performers of all time. A generation of disgruntled young were inspired by his powerful odes to rebellion set to the music of The Doors, who found in his words an expression of their own variety of feelings. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.